Welcome to Hope Blooms, a podcast from the Early Pregnancy Loss Association.
At EPLA, we seek to support women and families suffering early pregnancy loss by providing resources, education, and community. It is our vision that no one suffers miscarriage alone. Welcome back to Hope Blooms. I'm Emily Carrington.
And I'm Maria Servold.
Today, Maria and I are going to talk about this idea that I think we hear a lot, but I don't always know what it means. Mm-hmm. And I think it's important here as we come up to Christmas to think about this. So people will say in the midst of any sort of grief or tragedy, be gentle with yourself. And I don't know that I completely know what I'm supposed to do.
Right.
So I just want to, it's a great lead in. So now we're going to talk about what you're supposed to do. And I'm admitting I have no idea. No, I don't think that's true. I have some thoughts, but I think it's something we need to, I'm not here to prescribe what to do, but I think it's something we need to start unpacking.
Yep.
And
give
talking
some ideas. It's sort of like these words, like, be gentle and make space and all these things. And they're useful concepts if you can sort of flesh it out,
Right.
So.
Right. So what do you think? Be gentle. Well, what's the first thing that comes to your mind when someone says be gentle with yourself?
Yes. Well, and I think, unfortunately, it can be sort of different from person to person, which doesn't help. But for me, what it means is don't expect too much of yourself, because I tend to be the person who's like, here's my to-do list. I'm going to do these 18 things. And if I don't get it done, I'm a terrible person. And so, if I were going through something and someone were to say, be gentle with yourself, that would say to me, just try to do one thing. That's sort of the rule I made for myself, even after like giving birth, because I'd still be trying to do 1,000 things and then I'd feel bad and, get frustrated. So sort of to be gentle to myself, I'd say do one thing a day, do one load of laundry or make one meal or, take care of one random chore. So for me, it's don't expect to, don't force yourself to do too much.
I think that's good and probably true. I have like weird images of like giving yourself a spa day.
Right.
And I feel like there's two sides of all of these, right? That's probably true. But I could also see, sometimes this idea of like, don't be too hard on yourself. I always fear like, it's maybe why I'm not very good at being gentle with myself. Like, but if things are like falling down around me, it's hard to be gentle with myself. Like I'm not getting dinner on the table and there's no way to be gentle with myself because my children need to eat and my husband needs to eat and I need to eat. Right. I think that's something we forget. Right. So there's things you can't sort of excuse and not do. So I get frustrated, right? Like I feel the same way. Like, okay, lighten my load. And then I look around and I'm like, but everyone has to eat and be healthy and safe. What does lightening my load look like?
And sometimes then that necessarily involves other people, which, is if you're listening and you're not going through a loss or something similar, you can be the person to take care of some of those particular needs for the friend so that the friend can be gentle on themselves, right? Like we do after someone has a baby, they get meals for weeks, right? At least around here that happens. Right. And so that's the kind of thing you could do for someone who's had a loss. Can I bring you dinner tonight? Or can I set up so people bring you dinner for the next week or two?
And not feeling guilty about having people help you.
Exactly.
I think it's important. And I think it's important after miscarriage to understand that there is both that physical experience of having delivered a baby and then the grief of having no baby. So I'm personally really good at after I have a baby, like I do not feel guilty. I'm like,
letting people do all the things. Yeah.
When my first child was born, right? Like I'm like, we need mother's help in our house for 6 weeks. My husband would bring me, a snack of like nuts, eggs, and cheese in bed in the morning so I could nurse with a little bit of chocolate. There was not an ounce of me that felt, I was like, you need to nourish this nursing mother. And my job is to lay here and feed the baby. And I know there are some moms who feel guilty about that. So if you're listening, I encourage you to not feel guilty about that. But I think miscarriage is interesting because I could put in my head, it's okay that other people are cooking and cleaning and that people are bringing me food, because my number one job right now is to feed this baby. And I could take that on as a burden and enjoyment and task. But after a miscarriage,
Yep.
it was easy for me to say, I'm focusing on this baby. This is my job.
Yes.
This is my purpose. This is what it's all been for. And everyone else is here to support me. But when my arms were empty, I couldn't say that to myself.
Right. We're sort of afraid to,
nurse your grief.
Exactly. Yes. Nurse the grief. And it somehow feels not automatic to demand that space or ask for that time or the help or whatever. And yet that's sort of what we're around here saying is, no, you can, and here's things to help you do it. And, just like any other, if you were to lose a parent or whatever, and you'd have bereavement days from work and you'd be allowed to go to the funeral and people would do those things to help and support you, it should be the same for a miscarriage, if there's things that you need. And as far as going into Christmas, I think another thing to think about is the emotional, being gentle with yourself emotionally, because sort of like we talked about with Thanksgiving, there's expectations, right, of what it's going to look like and how it's going to feel and what people are going to do and say. And perhaps you're imagining a Christmas with a little baby, or, maybe announcing a pregnancy at Christmas or something like that. And so then when that's not there, to not feel, we want to encourage you to not feel like you've messed up or something, right?
Well, and permission to have those feelings. So I think when I hear the word gentle, I think like calm. Like I said, some sort of spa day. Be gentle with yourself. Sit and meditate. Sit and pray. Sit and write. That's fine. And if you feel that way, like receive, pray, sit quietly. I experienced all of those things. But I also cried violently, and especially around the holidays. And that was mixing with our due dates and hormones. And I am not giving you permission to be violent, but I am being gentle with yourself, I think, means feeling those feelings too, right?
Yep.
There was a letting it out, a crying it out, that did not sound gentle from me, did not feel gentle. And it wasn't even necessarily a beating myself up, but just letting me let it out.
Right. And not sort of feeling like, oh, it's Christmas and we have to be a happy family and I have to look this way and do these things. And, you don't need to feel obligated to be that way or to falsify your emotions if that's not how you feel.
Right. And to sort of give yourself, it's a hard push and pull. Because I don't think being gentle with yourself means letting yourself go, letting yourself sort of fall into indulgence, right? Like I don't think there's an indulgent element of being gentle with yourself. But I also think sometimes our fear of indulgence keeps us from
allowing ourselves to relax at all or to feel the feelings.
Freedom. If you are at all a not list maker or type B person like Maria and I, we'll have another podcast for you. I think we're revealing sort of our own
faults and tendencies.
Personalities, right? Often your strengths are your weaknesses.
Yeah, right.
So as you see, Maria and I are cut from that same cloth.
I think maybe the someone who maybe isn't more type A, their problem might be that they just sort of dissolve into the shadows and no one sees them. And so for them being, gentle would be maybe more sort of coming forward and asking for help, sort of allowing someone to help them with their feelings as opposed to just hiding,
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And and I think that's, I don't want to overprescribe. I think every personality is different. And, we've never claimed to be therapists or mental health experts, but we're humans with feelings. And I think we say, and I don't think you can let your personality sort of over dictate some of that. But I just think we have to continue to think about gentleness and what does that mean?
Right.
Because it's just such a...
And I think encouraging those who are going through loss to ask for what they need. or like if you need something, if you need help, reach out to someone, who's near you, and just to not be afraid to, in whatever way it works for you, take it easy for a while. Right. Or to, not to be afraid to feel the feelings like we've talked about before.
Right. And some of that may be, it's always a tension. I think we're talking a lot to moms here. Mm-hmm. I think husbands and partners need to also have a gentleness and realize that grief. And I think it's going to be different when you have children, sort of your responsibility. If you're going through a loss with children and everyone still needs fed, I think there's sometimes decisions that need to be made and tensions, and something is going to have to relax. If you're making everything homemade and your priority is going to need to be feeding the children, it may not be, that may be a frozen pizza, and that's going to be okay. Mm-hmm. I know in my own experience, times that are hard, being gentle with myself has meant, changing those expectations, not letting them, there's a certain amount of like, if I don't do being gentle with myself is not always letting everything go. If I don't do the laundry at all, and then all of a sudden I've not only have a pile of dirty laundry, but we can't get out the door in the morning because no one can find underwear. So that's not, and then I'm in another pile of tears, right? Because everyone's in a pile of tears,
right?
And we've made no progress. But also it's okay to, that's where I think, if you're not getting it done, then maybe it's time to ask for help.
Right, exactly. Yeah.
Even with the laundry. And there have been times in my life, I remember that I got to a point where a friend asked to do laundry. And for me, that was like really humbling.
Yes.
Someone else folded my underwear for 6 weeks. And that was big.
Yep.
But also we functioned as a family and but also pre-kids. I think we're talking about this with the idea of having young children. And I know a lot of mothers are experiencing that, but pre-kids, I went to work 2 days after DNC.
Yeah.
Like, what was I doing?
Right.
And in some ways, I wanted to be among the living. But was I really
physically ready? Yeah.
Right. No.
Yeah.
Right.
But you've probably felt like, oh, I should. And also I want to, do my normal life and all these kind of things. And,
right. And let's get back at it.
And maybe what you needed was someone to give you permission to take the time.
Right. Which probably will lead us into we will address giving yourself space for that. I think this gentleness and space, I think what we mean as a culture, I talk about what do you hear. I'm not sure if as we say it, we know what we mean.
Right. Well, I think it's one of those sort of they're sort of those catch-all words that sound nice, but use like, what does that actually mean? And so, we can help define that.
Right. I think we need to keep talking about it. So as Christmas comes, let's talk a little bit about this idea of expectations. I want to start with the woman who's lost her first child to miscarriage. What was your Christmas like
after that? Yeah, it was a long time ago. And sort of thankfully now so many of my Christmas memories are filled with my living children. But I do remember we still went to my parents' house in Colorado. I remember sort of sitting around feeling empty, right? Like I was expecting to be like 3 months pregnant and telling people, right?
You had
in this exciting Christmas moment.
Baby.
Yes. And then it wasn't there. So I remember feeling, sad, not like that I couldn't get out of bed or anything, but just sort of, there was a little bit of a gray mist over everything, right? Like it wasn't the same as other Christmases. But that's the thing now, looking back, I can see that was a season, right? Like that was a season where those holidays were hard. But then, I think it was the following Christmas that I had a positive pregnancy test with my now 8-year-old. So that sort of then changed that around. But it was okay to have that sad Christmas.
Well, and I think that's important and interesting. If you're sad this Christmas, you haven't ruined Christmas forever.
Exactly.
And I think there's some triggers I think there's my own experience has been when we get, for me, the fall really reminds me of my loss. I was due with my first baby in the fall. I had 2 losses in the fall. So I do struggle, but it hasn't taken my joy forever.
Right. Right. And so maybe some of that gentleness can be telling yourself that, or affirming to yourself that it's not going to be this way every single time. Right.
Yeah. It shouldn't, it might. And I think though, last night we set up our Christmas tree. This is back to the giving space. And I pulled out the ornaments that we had bought. And I had ornaments for my living children. And I had ornaments for the children we've lost. And this Christmas, I fondly hung them on the tree. They felt good to pull out. We were all there and we were all remembered in that space. Buying them, I sort of bought them desperately. Like, we will remember our babies.
I need something physical. Yeah. Right.
And I was sort of doing all the things like we will buy ornaments and we will buy flowers and we will make boxes and we will remember our babies. And realizing I didn't need all of that, but also being gentle with myself to give myself that.
Yep.
And some of it has stuck. I kind of threw everything at the wall, right? And now it's those ornaments that years later, there's space for that.
Right. And maybe in the moment you're like, do I really need this? Is this silly? Will I care about this later? And it's like, if you feel like that's going to help you, buy the ornament, and then, in the future, it can be this lovely remembrance.
Right. Or a tiny little stocking or, I think that's the start of sort of being gentle and realizing what your expectations were for Christmas. Were you going to be pregnant? Were you going to announce? Were you going to announce the name?
Yep. Was it due then?
Was it due? Or were you going to have a live, living, happy little bundle of joy? My first baby was supposed to be 5 or 6 weeks old at Christmas. And we had thought about it, right? Like we had already, I'm a planner. We've established that in the beginning of this episode, right? Like, so when I found out I was pregnant in March, I was already telling my family, I'm going to have this baby 11 days before Thanksgiving. Y'all are going to have to come to me. I'm not traveling for Thanksgiving and I'm not traveling for Christmas. I already told you, I'm really good at when there's a living baby. Y'all are gonna have to feel, I'm just sitting. Even before my first child, I support that. Just sit for 6 weeks and feed the baby and do what you want to do. You don't have to be jailed. I don't mean it in that way, but let people wait on you.
Right.
So I'd already said that 9 months earlier. So I expected this little newborn, and I expected. Right. I was already setting everything up to be gentle. I expected to not want to ride in a car. I expected to not want to take my 5-week-old everywhere. Right. Like I had set up for what I needed. And I think it's going to look different for different people. I think some people have a newborn and like, I need to get to my mom's house. That's fine. But I had already made space. And then that all came crashing down. And I didn't have a newborn. And then I got pregnant again in September. So then I was supposed to be, 3 or 4 months pregnant, announcing the pregnancy and not maybe announcing gender. And I wasn't doing that either. And then I was just sad.
Yep.
And mad.
And to not
mad.
Right. And right, exactly. And sort of the gentleness thing, it's like, it's okay to feel those feelings, and also to not be too hard on yourself for having requested things or made plans and then had them fall through. It's not your fault that it didn't work out that way you were planning, right?
Right.
And you don't need to feel bad about it, which is how I would have. That's how I'd feel. Like I said this thing and then it didn't happen, and so now you're going to feel guilty about it.
Right, right. And of course, nobody's like, I thought you were hosting Christmas. No, everything just reverted back. But I was mad. And I think I struggle with, where is there room for anger and being mad when someone is telling me to be gentle with myself?
Yes. Well, and that's hard, I guess, because gentle, and it's again this sort of nebulous word, but maybe it does mean you can feel how you feel, and that's okay.
Don't mean
put
genuine?
Yes, maybe that's what we mean. I mean, in some ways, yes. Like, feel how you feel, and that's okay. And don't feel bad for feeling how you feel. Don't try to force yourself to stop feeling that way.
Right. And I think I don't want to give people permission, like I said, to be explosive or violent. But I am not dispositionally a calm, gentle, not a violent. I'm like very, like, contact sports stress me out. Running, dancing, I can do those things. But like when someone comes at me, like, I don't like that. But I can feel things really big. So being told to be gentle has always kind of frustrated me.
Right. Because you feel like, I don't want to be. I'm mad and this happened and I want it to get better. Right.
Yeah.
And
yeah. And at the same time, I don't want to pull everyone down with me.
Yes.
It's okay to be mad. How do you find a healthy space for that? And I think things like music and art and writing and meditating.
Finding someone to, getting a therapist. We've talked about that. That's okay. Or the grief coach, right?
Yeah,
like
have
it's
someone
okay to ask for that help.
Walk you through that, I think, is important. And relying on your partner.
Yes.
Because they're going through this too.
Yes. Yeah. And that's so true. I think we can, feel like it's okay. I'll figure it out. I'll handle it. I don't need to bother anybody else. And it's like, especially the partner, it's like they're there too, right? They're right there with you. And you can ask how they are, and they can help, you can help each other.
Yeah. Don't cut people out. Yeah. And I think there's this fine line of, man, like, yeah, what do people mean? I don't know if I know any better. I think we've come to some good things. I think genuine is important. But then I want to also protect against, like, that doesn't mean giving into every impulse.
Right.
We talked a little bit about indulgence. If, I don't know that it's being gentle to drink 6 glasses of wine every night.
Right.
I'll say right now, if you find yourself doing that, find help. And that's not gentle, right? Like that's self-destructive.
Right.
So I think it's important, like, I think that's one of the difficult things is finding that space to be genuine. And that is where I think community and support, therapy, spiritual leadership, where it's safe to be mad, but that doesn't give you permission to self-destruct. But being mad without the fear of self-destruction, I think I think we're wading into really dark spaces,
right?
Or can be, with this lovely idea of gentleness.
Yeah, and it goes a lot of places, but I think sort of the crux of it is to go, especially if we're talking about Christmas specifically, to not feel like you have to, whatever expectations you had, it's okay if they change. It's okay if you do something different. Not every Christmas is going to be like this. There will be good ones again. And to, not be afraid to ask for things you need, or to lower your expectations, or sort of, be okay with it looking different this year.
Well, and I think that's really good. And I think too, on that level, if you feel and see yourself going into these dark spaces, and it's not just permission to be mad, but some self-destruction, or part of being gentle is looking at that for what it is.
Exactly.
And then saying, I need my community. I need spiritual leadership, pastoral care, therapy. That is being gentle with yourself.
Yep. Because you're being honest.
Because you're being honest. Yeah. So I've been triggered, and now all of a sudden I'm drinking it away. Ignoring that isn't being gentle with yourself. Fighting that, now you're just fighting 2 demons at once, right? Instead saying, like, I can look at this darkness. I can look straight into this darkness. And I mean, that requires some mental clarity itself, right? To like look at it and say, I need help. It's back to the I need help. I think this comes back to that continued, like, you're not alone.
Yep.
So even whatever darkness or demons you feel like this stirs up or on your back, that's not okay, but it's okay. It's overcomeable.
Yes. Especially because other people have gone through it.
Right.
And those people might want to help you.
Right. So we've talked about this. This is why the support groups exist.
Yep.
That's why the grief coaches exist. That's why the therapists exist. We're all here to catch you in different ways. You know, we're here to open this conversation. We're here, you know, I feel like we sort of rip Band-Aids off. Like, hey, there's a problem over here.
Right.
And maybe being gentle is, you know, it's not gentle to not treat the wound.
Right.
But sometimes that darn cleaning the wound really hurts, right?
Yeah. But then later it will be better.
Yeah. So we have to see that, admit that, right? That's the honesty. Like, be genuine with your feelings. Admit and be honest with what they really are. And even if it's not, you know, I think anyone would need help walking through this. I think we just over and over and over again have said that, right?
Yep.
Like, you're not alone. You don't have to do this on your own. And there's
especially at this time of year.
Especially at this time of year. And look, allow there to be some sadness in Christmas. I think I think there's a beautiful demonstration of joy at Christmas, and there should be, but it's all sort of predicated on the need for darkness, right? Like, there's a reason Christmas is 4 days after the darkest day of the year, right? This is light, but that you don't need light in light places. Not to get too philosophical there, but like, right. So I think it's okay. And for me, I had to give myself permission for there to be sadness in Christmas, and to realize that was not incongruent with my own religious beliefs. Or even the community of the season.
Yes, that's how I would have felt too. Like, put on a happy face. It's Christmas.
It's Christmas. We're supposed to be happy.
Right. Even though people around me would have been like, it's okay. Like, if we're at my parents' house, you know, my mom, I'm sure would have said, it's okay to be sad. We understand, you know?
Yeah. And to be open to that.
Yeah.
You know, a lot of churches will do blue Christmas services. I encourage you to go look for that. There's something really beautiful and full there when you can allow that space. And that
you're not ruining Christmas for somebody else by taking a moment to.
Right. You're not just a Scrooge.
Right.
You're not a Scrooge at all.
You're right.
You know, I think you could be a Scrooge if you demand your Christmas be, you know, Scrooge was right, like jealous and selfish. Selfish was right, his biggest sin. So,
but it's not selfish to feel sad. If you feel sad, that's okay.
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly. Well, I think we made a good big mess of gentleness. And I hope someone finds this helpful and encouraging. That it's not, but I think making a mess of it, step one, that it's not something like, go be gentle with yourself.
Well, yeah.
Okay.
It's helpful just to hash out some thoughts and then, you know, encourage thoughts in others. Yeah.
This is messy. Yeah. So I hope this, if, you know, got you all thinking. And if you have any thoughts, we would love to hear them. What are some ways you've been gentle with yourself? What are some ways you've not been gentle with yourself? I think we need to start the conversation. And I think that's what this is. And I think over the last 5 years, we started the conversation on miscarriage. And we were part of a lot of voices. And I think sort of the next step is hashing out, what are these things we're even saying and how messy is this? So thank you all for listening. And I really wish all of you a merry, happy, and gentle, a gentle Christmas, whatever that means for you this year. So thank you for listening.
Yes, thank you for listening. We'll see you in the new year.
Thank you for listening to Hope Blooms, a podcast from the Early Pregnancy Loss Association.
To learn more about how we and you can support women suffering early pregnancy loss, visit our website at miscarriagecare.com or find us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Thank you for listening.